But before we get into any of that, we got to talk about Wake Forest. We got to talk about the Demon Deacons. They lost today in overtime against BC. I believe they were up by 10 with about 6 minutes left and kind of puttered that thing away. They now have one quad one win, Steve. They have two quad 2 losses, and they played the 338th best schedule. I'm not the expert here. I'm not one of the guys on fielding the 68, but when I look at that profile, I have a hard time saying that that's a team that deserves to be in the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, today was tough. Today was an opportunity that they couldn't let slip by. And obviously, I think they made great strides in their programs in these first 2 seasons, from last year to this year. But today was one they had to have, especially when you look at the non-conference, you look at their strength of schedule, and you look at the quad 1 wins. And I still think they're going to have a chance. They're just going to have to hope the balls bounce the right way when you look at some of these other high major tournaments that nobody steals any bids and they can still sneak in there. But I would if I'm Wake, I'm going to be very uncomfortable.
Yeah, Randolph.
I
agree
with as well.
Go ahead, Ashton.
What else?
Oh no, I agree with Coach Prom as well. In general, and one thing I definitely want to make is, with being deeper into March Madness, getting closer right now, you start to see the ups and downs of what really drives a team, and this is where predicated on your culture, your leaders. This is going to be huge. I think this is a huge time period for the schools like a Wake Forest that are on the bubble. You talk about Steve Forbes, Alondas Williams getting Player of the Year. Ultimately, when you don't have the the quality wins that you need, ultimately you need that leadership to get over the hump. That's what they didn't do today.
They look like a team. The pressure got to them tonight. To me,
yeah.
I thought they were a team that came out thinking like, all right, we got to win this. Kind of like what we talked about with Duke. The Duke on that movie night with Coach K against Carolina. Those kids came out with all that pressure. I think these kids came out knowing that. I believe they know they had to win this game tonight, and that it would have been okay if they had lost to Carolina or whatever. And they felt the pressure of it, and they just didn't perform well. They didn't answer the bell. They didn't respond to the pressure, and I think it cost them. I think it'll be very difficult for them to get a bid. I mean, they got to hope everything kind of falls. But, as we said before, as you already laid out, they don't have the strongest resume from the beginning.
Have any of you guys ever been in that situation where you're heading into a conference tournament and it's like, I gotta win here if we got any chance? And I don't just mean, when you're at Murray State, or if you guys know you're not going to get that at-large bid. Have you ever been in a situation where it's basically you win or you're probably not going to get a bid? Any of you guys?
No, I haven't. From a standpoint of, Murray State, you kind of take that off because, for the most part, you're probably not going to get an at-large, though maybe you think you should. But Iowa State, when I was there, we knew we were either going, or I kind of knew, hey, we had to win the tournament to get in. We knew we probably weren't going from that standpoint. So, no.
We actually, the last time Wake was in the tournament, it was that way. We ended up, I think, if it wasn't senior night, it was close to senior night. We had to beat Louisville. That was that big win, beating Louisville, and then we had to win, and we won a game in the tournament. I think we lost to Virginia Tech in the second round, and they were ranked, so it didn't hurt us. And then that's how we ended up getting in the last 4 in. But we had to get that Louisville win and and we could not lose that first round game. I want to say it was the BC. And we won that game. And then, like we talking about now, the second round loss to Virginia Tech with Buzz Williams and those guys didn't hurt us, and we were able to get in the last 4 in. But had we lost that game, we were done.
Right. What is the pressure like in that moment? Are you aware of it? Like, how much do you guys pay attention to that stuff?
The funny thing is we were aware of it, but we were like, all right, let's just keep it loose and not even talk about it with our guys. Like, you got to block out the noise as much as you can, and just, you kind of carry it like, don't worry about that. We're going in this trying to win it. They just looked like they talked about it, and they just, I wasn't in the locker room, obviously, but they didn't respond well to the pressure tonight.
Yeah.
And the one thing, when you look at from a standpoint of Wake Forest, on normal years in the ACC, they're in because of the strength of the league and what they did. I think the problem this year is when you look at their strength of schedule and you look at those games, it's because the ACC hasn't been as strong. And so those wins don't resonate as much in conference.
And I think tomorrow's the big bubble matchup tomorrow in the ACC is going to be Virginia Tech taking on Notre Dame. And I think that's pretty much the perfect example of what you're talking about, right, Prom? I think Notre Dame finished, second in the ACC regular season this year. And they are, I mean, they basically have to win to solidify themselves for fielding the 68. We have them as one of the last four in. We have them playing in a playing game, Ashton. So I do think that this is an example of this is just what the ACC is this year.
Oh, for sure. I obviously it's not one of the top conferences, and I haven't had a great ACC or great season with my Pitt Panthers. But overall, the ACC is down for sure.
Now, Randolph, you mentioned, I think probably about a week ago, that you thought Virginia Tech was the team that could sneak up on some people in this ACC tournament. They almost blew a lead to Clemson, but they found a way to get it done. Darius Maddox hit a 3 at the buzzer in overtime. Do you think they can they win tomorrow? Can they beat Notre Dame?
I think they can. I think they can. Actually, I called the game when they beat them at home. I mean, obviously, this is a neutral site game, and they're going to pose an issue for Notre Dame inside. I mean, they're a good defensive team. They have the bodies to throw inside, to balance out Atkinson. And the biggest difference is going to be that Mutz and Lazetsky matchup. One's more inside, one more's outside. But they got the perimeter defenders to defend on the outside. I mean, that's Virginia Tech probably feels good about that matchup.
How dangerous are they?
They're a balanced team. I mean, I'll say this: they're probably one of the few ACC teams that has a bench. Like you saw Maddox if you watched him, Maddox didn't get any burn early in the year, and now as the season's going on, then they playing the backup point guard who ended up the freshman being on the court. Padula is now starting to be on the floor late game, so they're starting to go into their bench and go like 8 or 9 deep. That a lot of teams in the conference just can't, they don't have. And you'll need that. If they're going to go on a run, they're going to need, 4 games to do it. So they're going to have to.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Steve, I'm sorry. I cut you off there.
I was just saying, if I'm Wake Forest, I'm probably hoping Notre Dame wins that game because Notre Dame's pretty much already in the field. When you really look, if you took a straw poll, Virginia Tech can work its way in. Yeah. And you don't want Virginia Tech. All these teams have 2 or 3 more days to get ahead of Wake Forest right now, to get ahead of Xavier right now. And so you need them eliminated as quickly as possible. So that's a big, Randolph and all the Wake guys, they're big Notre Dame fans, I would think, tomorrow.
Yeah.
And Virginia Tech I think the offensive flow just, for Virginia Tech and the way Mike Young runs, his offense, reversing the ball from side to side and getting quality shots consistently. I think that's, it's tough to scout as well, to your point, Steve.
Yeah, that's got to be so stressful just sitting there where all you're doing is rooting for these 11 teams that are going to be right there on the bubble to lose. And then you have to go and watch the Atlantic 10 or the Mountain West or the American, these conferences that probably are going to be 1 or 2 bid leagues that have some teams that can make a little bit of noise in there. I can't imagine what that stress level is like. Have any of you been in that situation?
You don't know. I mean, like I told you with us, we didn't know. We were just sitting there. You do the meetings, you do everything, the right way. You kind of practice kind of like we don't know. The question is going to be, but there's a big letdown if you're talking about expecting to go to the tournament and then, all right, I end up going to the NIT. And then you got to have those conversations like, all right, do I want to play into that? We had a situation with that one year and we were like, we didn't get into it. And they were like, guys, you want to play? And they was like, no. Tournament was in Greensboro. And before we got back to Winston-Salem, guys on the bus was like, nah, we don't want to play. Like, that's it. Like, we're ready for it to be over with. So that's part of the letdown you got to deal with.
Yeah.
I actually had, my first 3 years were, pretty good for sure at Pitt. But my senior year, we actually went to the CBI. And ended up winning the CBI, but overall it just wasn't it was just different, man. When you're not really playing for anything, your sense of urgency, especially the practices, you got
nobody's hanging a CBI banner. Nobody's hanging a CBI banner up in the gym, right?
Hey, look, I'm not gonna lie. I think Jeff Capel right now, if Pitt made the CBI, he might hang a CBI banner.
He might take
it. He needs to hang anything that he can get. Talk about Xavier. We need to talk about Travis Steele, because the Musketeers found a way to lose in the first round of the Big East tournament. They found a way to do the one thing that they couldn't do and still really have a great chance to get into this NCAA tournament. They are now sitting at, I believe it's 17. They're 18-13 on the season. They have 5 quad 1 wins. They have a couple of quad 3 losses. This is their second quad 3 loss. Ashton, I'm going to you first on this one. First and foremost, when you lose this many games in a row that they've lost on the stretch of the season, I believe it's 10 of their last 14 games. Should you be allowed to be in the tournament? Should we weigh some of these games that happen later in the season more?
I would think so. Anytime you lose that many, it's tough for me to put you in. I just, watching the game today, I obviously love how Paul Scruggs, plays. He plays hard, and, that was a little bit to his detriment, obviously at the end of the game. But I just thought defensively they didn't guard the ball in the second half. One-on-one defense, Butler got into the lane whenever they wanted. And then they overhelped too much as well, in those closeouts on those catch and shoots. They couldn't really get out there. And, for a team to be on a bubble like that, you expected a little, more sense of urgency, especially in the second half. Guys that are playing hard, but, just getting through the ups and the downs, the momentum of the game. But ultimately, I don't have them in. So and they needed this win, more than anything, obviously.
But the one thing they got going for them, if you're going to look from a positive standpoint, is 5 quad 1 wins. And I know we've talking analytics and, we've talked about that and beat that to death all year. They've got 5 quad 1 wins. So if I'm them, I would be sleeping more comfortable than Wake Forest with just 1 quad 1 win. And that's just my opinion, because if you're really just going to punch the numbers that way. But you got to be sick if you're Xavier, just the way it ended. I put the game on after I got home, picking up my son from school. It's 66-60. And I text you guys like, is this good? Does this close? Does this put Xavier in? And I'm watching the game with my son. And he's like, it's just a 2-possession game, Dad. And the next thing you know, man, Scruggs makes a great play, misses the free throw, and then obviously miscommunication. Steele, no question, wanted a foul only if they were up 3. Scruggs, unfortunately makes the mistake, fouls, and then Butler dominates overtime. And they put themselves in a tough position the way they just finished the season. You hate that because, I saw them in the early part of the year. I talked about them really throughout most of the preseason and early conference. I thought they had a really good basketball team. But what caught up with them, shooting. It's what we talked about. Shooting and guard play, 3 for 15 from 3, 13 for 29 from the free throw line.
Yep, that's not going to get it done when you have a front court that can't guard anyone, RC. I think, to me, that's the biggest issue with this group, is trying to play Jack Fremantle, Jack Nungy together is just something that was a recipe for disaster.
Rob, let me ask you this now. Let's say it comes down to Wake. Who would you put in the tournament if you had to pick one between Xavier and Wake? And what metrics are you using to decide how they get in?
I think that Wake Forest probably would get left out in that situation, just because if you look at the resumes and you look at what has actually been accomplished, and you look at the fact that Xavier went out and challenged themselves a little bit more in non-conference play, I think that you should reward that. That said, I would rather see Wake Forest in the NCAA tournament than Xavier. I entirely disagree with the sentiment that like a team that has lost 10 of their last 14, that is very clearly playing their worst basketball of the season, should get in over someone that has done something else. To me, I would make the comparison Xavier or Rutgers, right? Rutgers was awful for the first month of the year. They've been playing great. They finished 4th in the Big Ten. Give me Rutgers over Xavier, right? Is that that's kind of where I'm at with it. Teams grow during the year. Some of them grow up, some of them grow down. I would rather see a team that played their way in than someone that won a couple games early. Like when you come down to having to pick between one or the other, is that crazy? Am I wrong there?
No, Rutgers.
No, there's no wrong. Yeah, no. I mean, it's one of those from you would think they should be in being 4th. But
it's kind of like Notre Dame 2nd in the ACC. That's what's
we're questioning it. Yeah.
That's what's so different now then, I finished college in the mid-90s. I know, Randolph, you played in the mid-90s. Back then, if you're second or fourth in these leagues, we're not even debating that. I mean, you're in.
When have we ever debated a Power 5 conference, finishing second place in a Power 5 conference, and we're like,
that's true.
Are they really in? Like,
fourth?
Ever?
Yeah, never. I mean,
ever.
And
second?
Yeah. In the ACC, and we don't know if they're in. Rutgers is fourth, and we don't know if they're in. To me, that's mind-boggling.
Do you guys remember was it 2012 when Washington won the Pac-12 regular season title, but they went 7-6 in non-conference play, and they ended up not getting an at-large bid? You guys remember that?
I do.
That was when the Pac-12 was a mid-major, and I guess the Pac-12 is still a mid-major because they're going to get 3 bids this year. Let me ask you this, RC. We've talked about this a little bit before, but is it time for Xavier to make a coaching change? Like, I feel bad putting you guys on the spot, but I will say this: Travis Steele. This was supposed to be the year that Travis Steele got it done. You get Paul Scruggs back, you get Jack Nungy in. He built this roster. This is his team. This is his program. They collapsed again. They've lost 10 of their last 14 games. If they get let out of the tournament, like what are you waiting for at that point? You give them one more year to see if you can get it done. This was supposed to be that year that you got to try to get it done. 4 years, no tournaments at Xavier. That's tough.
You can't feel good about it. And the question is going to be is that we talked about this earlier. So if you're going to go into next year with so many lame duck coaches, unless you're sitting here telling me he got a massive buyout, then if you're going to make the change, that's just something that I agree in general. If you're going to make the change next year, then just pay everybody and go. Now, it's easy to say that in the pandemic. I don't know. Holding our hope. I like those guys. I don't like calling for anybody's job. I know the effect that it has and it's brutal, but you also know you got to win, and it's not like we're talking 3 or 4 years. This is what, year 5?
Year 4.
Finishing his fourth year.
Year 4. Yeah. So I'd say he gets next year. I think you got to give him next year. I mean, there's nothing that happened this year that makes you look at next year to feel positive about it. I'll say that, but I do think you got to give him next year. You got to. I
think the COVID year kind of messed a lot of teams up just in general as well. But anytime you have a transfer portal like this, also, anything can change with one transfer, a couple transfers, and a high school guy. Depending on your culture, it could literally turn around quickly. So I'll never really count, many guys out, especially when he's this close to the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, and they've been right on the brisk of the NCAA tournament all 3 years, the last 3 years. I mean, they were in Maui with us my 4th year at Iowa State, and they were out there. That was his only kind of subpar year. His last 3 years, they've been right there on the bubble, right there to get in, and they still may get in. When you look, I mean, they've got 5 quad 1 wins, and you got to hang your hat on that. And they just can't hope Virginia Tech wins the ACC tournament, that, somebody like Florida wins the SEC tournament. You know what I mean? You don't need any surprises, and they still may get in from that standpoint. But, leading your team through COVID and different things like that happened over these last couple of years, that's not easy. And, that can change a lot of different things. But that's just the reality, and it's part of the business, though. And so you got to
they have the best resume, though, of these teams that we're talking about.
No question.
That they have the best resumes. So I think the only thing we're talking about, though, is there just seems to be a pattern that they're fading late in the season. Like, what is going on? Like, you got to address why. Is it something that you can be done? It's not a matter of coaching or whatever, the talent. There's not a talent issue at Xavier. So it's like, what's going on? Why are we fading these last 3 years? Because it very easily could have been tournament teams.
Yep. To your point, they lost 5 of their last 8 games in 2020, and they lost 6 of the last 8 games last season, and then 10 of their last 14 this year, which is not a promising trend. If you're Xavier, you're rooting that Michigan beats Indiana tomorrow, and you're hoping that VCU loses in the first round of the A-10 tournament, and you hope that UNLV beats Wyoming, then loses in the second round of the Mountain West tournament situation. You want SMU to lose. You want all of these teams that are in that same region as you to end up losing.